At 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October, I discovered I was worth exactly 5 out of 10 points to my wife of 8 years. Not 4, not 6. A solid, mediocre 5. Like a lukewarm cup of coffee or a movie you forget 20 minutes after watching. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Jack Dalton, 38 years old, owner of Heritage Home Restoration here in Millbrook, Maine. I fix old houses for a living, which seems fitting since I apparently needed some fixing myself. At least according to Cara, my wife, who is currently in our kitchen having what she thought was a private phone conversation. He's a good interim solution, she was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when discussing home appliances that needed replacing. But I'm still looking for something better. Maybe a 7 or 8. I stood frozen in the hallway, still wearing my work boots, holding the sandwich I'd come downstairs to make. The old Victorian house we'd been renovating for 3 years had thin walls, something I'd been meaning to fix but now felt grateful for. Jack's reliable, Cara continued, and I could picture her examining her manicured nails the way she did when she was being particularly dismissive. He pays the bills, he's decent in bed, but honestly, I feel like I'm settling. He's got no ambition beyond fixing other people's broken houses. The person on the other end, probably her roommate Melanie from before we got married, who'd been staying in our guest room for the past month, said something that made Cara laugh. A placeholder, that's perfect. He's like the human version of a stock photo. Generic husband material until I find something custom-made. I set my sandwich down on the hall table and really listened. This wasn't a casual complaint between friends. This was a performance review, and I was failing. Derek from work asked me out again, Cara said. I'm thinking about it. Jack would never know. He's always buried in some dusty basement or crawl space. Besides, what he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Derek Lane. I knew Derek. 36, worked at Cara's tech startup as some kind of marketing director, drove a BMW he probably couldn't afford, and had the kind of gym-sculpted physique that came from having too much time and not enough real work to do. I'd met him at Cara's company parties, where he'd made a point of mentioning his marathon times and his CrossFit achievements, while looking at my calloused hands like they were evidence of some evolutionary step backward. The thing is, Cara was saying, I need to be smart about this. Jack's useful right now. The house renovation is almost done, and that'll add serious value. Plus, his business is finally making decent money, but once everything's settled... She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Once everything was settled, Jack the interim solution would be replaced by Jack the ex-husband. I picked up my sandwich and walked back upstairs, each step on the old wooden staircase announcing my presence. By the time I reached our bedroom, Cara was already off the phone, pretending to read a magazine in bed. Hey, she said without looking up. How was the Peterson job today? Fine, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed to untie my boots. Just some foundation work. Nothing too exciting. She turned a page. I might be late tomorrow night. Work thing. Another work thing? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. You've had a lot of those lately. She looked up then, her green eyes sharp. It's called having a career, Jack. Some of us are trying to build something bigger than just fixing old houses. There it was, the subtle dig, delivered with the precision of someone who'd been practicing. I nodded and headed for the bathroom. Sure, I said. Build away. In the mirror, I looked at my 5 out of 10 face. Brown hair that needed cutting, blue eyes that had seen too many early mornings, the kind of stubble that came from being too tired to shave properly. Not hideous, but not exactly leading man material either. I was the kind of guy who blended into crowds, who people forgot they'd met. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you advantages people don't see coming. I brushed my teeth and thought about Derek Lane with his perfect hair and his BMW. I thought about Cara rating me like a restaurant on some app, already planning her upgrade. I thought about being called a placeholder, an interim solution, a stock photo of a husband. When I climbed into bed, Cara was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there in the dark, listening to the old house settle around us, and started planning. If I was going to be temporary, I might as well make it memorable. The next morning, Cara left for work, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Black, fitted, the kind that required planning. She'd also spent an extra 20 minutes on her makeup, which she claimed was for a client presentation. Don't wait up tonight, she said, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like expensive lip gloss. This could run pretty late. Sure thing, I said, pouring coffee into my thermos. I'll probably be working late myself. The Morrison house needs new electrical in the basement. She was already checking her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Great. See you tomorrow. After she left, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, engine running, thinking. I had two choices. Pretend I'd never heard that conversation and continue being the oblivious husband, or do something about it. The old Jack might have chosen option 1. The new Jack, the one who'd been raided and found wanting, was curious about option 2. I called my business partner and oldest friend, Luke Morrison. We'd played hockey together in high school, and he'd been working with me for 5 years, ever since his construction company went under. Luke was the kind of guy who'd help you move a body without asking questions, though hopefully it wouldn't come to that. "Luke, I need a favor," I said when he picked up. "What kind of favor? The legal kind, or the kind where I need an alibi?" "The kind where you cover for me today. Tell anyone who asks that I'm working on the electrical at your cousin's place." "Jack, what's going on?" I told him about the phone conversation, about being an interim solution, about Derek and the mysterious work meetings. "Jesus," Luke said when I finished. "Cara said all that?" "Every word." "So what's the plan?" "I'm going to find out exactly what kind of work thing she's having tonight." Luke was quiet for a moment. "You sure you want to know?" "I'm sure I don't want to be surprised later." "All right. But Jack, if you're going to do this, do it right. Don't go in half-cocked and emotional. Be smart about it." "When am I not smart?" "You want the chronological list or the alphabetical one?" I spent the day making preparations. First stop was Radio Shack. Yes, they still existed in small Maine towns, where I bought a basic GPS tracker. Nothing fancy, just something that would tell me where Cara's car went. I'd installed enough of them in company vehicles to know how they worked. Second stop was my neighbor, Mrs. Ford. She was 73, retired from teaching high school English, and had made nosiness into an art form. She knew everything that happened in our neighborhood, and most of what happened in the rest of Millbrook. "Jack," she said when I knocked on her door. "How nice to see you. Come in, come in. I just made coffee." Mrs. Ford's house was the opposite of ours, completely finished, decorated within an inch of its life, and smelling like vanilla candles and old books. We sat in her living room, surrounded by doilies and family photos. "How's the renovation coming?" she asked, settling into her favorite chair. "Almost done. Should be finished by Christmas." "And Cara? I haven't seen much of her lately." This was my opening. "She's been working a lot. Late nights, weekend meetings. You know how it is with these tech companies?" Mrs. Ford's eyes sharpened. She might have been old, but she wasn't stupid. "Oh yes, I've noticed. She's been leaving at odd hours. And that friend of hers, Melanie? She's been coming and going quite a bit too." "Really?" "Just yesterday, I saw Melanie leaving around noon with an overnight bag. Seemed strange, since I thought she was staying in your guest room." I filed that information away. "Probably just running errands." Mrs. Ford sipped her coffee. "You know, Jack, in my 40 years of teaching, I learned to spot when someone was up to something. Call it intuition." "What kind of something?" She leaned forward conspiratorially. "The kind that ends with someone getting hurt. You be careful, dear." I left Mrs. Ford's house with more questions than answers, but also with the confirmation that I wasn't imagining things. Something was definitely going on. At 5:30, I parked across the street from Cara's office building and waited. Her car was in its usual spot in the parking garage, and I could see the little blinking light on the GPS tracker I'd attached under her rear bumper that morning. At 6:15, Cara emerged from the building. She wasn't alone. Derek Lane walked beside her, and they were standing closer than colleagues should. He said something that made her laugh. Not her polite work laugh, but the genuine one she used to reserve for me. They got into Derek's BMW and drove off. I followed at a distance, the GPS tracker on my phone showing their route. They weren't heading toward any restaurant I knew, or toward the convention center where Cara's company sometimes held events. They were heading toward the Riverside Inn, a boutique hotel downtown that advertised itself as intimate and discreet. I parked across the street and watched Derek hand his keys to the valet. Cara had changed clothes. The conservative dress from this morning had been replaced by something shorter, tighter, more like what she used to wear when we were dating. They walked into the hotel together, Derek's hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was anything but professional. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, staring at the hotel entrance, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. That would come later. It was clarity. Cara wasn't just thinking about cheating on me. She was already doing it. The work thing was Derek, and I was the idiot husband who was supposed to sit at home, oblivious and grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. My phone buzzed with a text from Cara. "Meeting running really late. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "No problem. Love you too." But as I drove home to our empty house, I was already thinking about how to make sure Cara's next performance review would be a lot more interesting than mine had been. I didn't sleep much that night. Cara came home around midnight, slipping into bed like she was trying not to wake me. She smelled like hotel soap and guilt, though she probably thought I couldn't tell the difference. "How was your meeting?" I asked quietly. "Long," she said. "Boring. You know how these client things are." "Sure do." In the morning, she was back to her normal routine: coffee, phone, minimal conversation. But I noticed she was texting more than usual, and she kept her phone face down on the counter. "I might have another late night tonight," she said, not looking up from her screen. "2 nights in a row? Must be a big client." "Huge," she said. "Could really change things for the company. For us?" "For us." "Right." After she left, I called Luke. "I need you to help me with something. Find anything interesting last night?" "You could say that. Can you meet me at Murphy's Bar around lunch?" Murphy's Bar was the kind of place where contractors and blue-collar workers grabbed beer and complained about their jobs. The bartender, Lenny Walsh, had been there for 15 years and knew everyone's business. More importantly, he was Luke's cousin and could be trusted to keep his mouth shut when necessary. I found Luke at a corner table, already nursing a beer despite it being barely noon. "So," he said when I sat down, "how bad is it?" "Hotel bad." Luke winced. "Jesus, Jack, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry yet. Be ready to help me do something about it." I told him about the Riverside Inn, about Derek's hand on Cara's back, about the lies and the texts and the overnight bag Melanie had been carrying. "Oh, what's the plan?" Luke asked. "I'm still working on it, but I need to know more about Derek Lane first. Everything: where he lives, where he hangs out, what his weaknesses are. I can ask around. My brother-in-law works in construction downtown, might know something about the guy." "Good. And Luke, this stays between us for now." "Of course. But Jack, you need to think about what you want out of this. You want to save your marriage or end it." I considered the question. Did I want to fight for Cara? Try to win her back from Derek and convince her I was worth more than 5 out of 10? "I want her to understand that actions have consequences," I said finally. "And I want Derek to learn that other people's wives aren't toys." Luke grinned. "Now that sounds like a plan I can get behind." That afternoon, while Cara was presumably at work, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. I drove to Derek's apartment complex, a trendy place called Harbor View that was all glass and steel and probably cost more per month than most people made. Derek's BMW was in its designated spot, which meant he was either home or had taken another car somewhere. I was about to leave when I saw him emerge from the building, wearing workout clothes and carrying a gym bag. Perfect. I followed him to CrossFit Millbrook, a gym that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought regular gyms weren't intimidating enough. Through the windows, I could see Derek warming up with a group of other overly muscled guys who probably spent more on protein powder than I spent on groceries. I parked and waited. An hour later, Derek emerged, sweaty and pleased with himself. He tossed his gym bag in the back seat of his BMW and headed back toward his apartment. That's when I made my first move. I pulled my truck up behind his BMW at a red light, close enough that he couldn't back up. When the light turned green, I stayed put. Derek honked his horn. I waved apologetically and stayed put. The light turned red again. Derek got out of his car, all swagger and irritation, and walked back to my truck. I rolled down my window. "Hey, buddy, you want to move your truck? Some of us have places to be." "Oh, sorry about that," I said, giving him my best aw-shucks smile. "Engine trouble. These old trucks, you know how it is." Derek looked at my truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that was admittedly not much to look at but ran perfectly, and his expression shifted to something between pity and contempt. "Maybe it's time for an upgrade," he said. "You know, you're probably right. I keep telling my wife we should get something newer, but she says I'm fine with what I have, that I should be grateful for what I've got." Something in Derek's face flickered. Did he recognize me? We'd only met briefly at Cara's work parties, and I'd been forgettable both times. "Well," he said, "sometimes you have to take what you want instead of waiting for permission." "Interesting philosophy," I said. "You live by that?" "Every day, buddy, every day." The light turned green again. I started my truck, which fired up immediately because there was nothing wrong with it, and pulled forward. In my rearview mirror, I saw Derek standing in the street for a moment, probably trying to figure out what had just happened. That night, Cara had another work meeting. This time, I didn't follow her. Instead, I drove to the Stump, a sports bar where a lot of Cara's coworkers hung out after hours. If Derek was with Cara, he wouldn't be there, but his friends might be. I was right. I spotted Brandon Kelly, Derek's workout buddy and fellow marketing drone, holding court at a table near the pool tables. Brandon was the kind of guy who thought being loud made him interesting and being cruel made him funny. I ordered a beer and positioned myself within earshot. Derek's got himself a new project, Brandon was saying to his companions. Married woman, husband some kind of contractor or something, blue-collar guy, totally clueless. Dangerous game, one of the others said. Not really. Derek says the guy's a pushover, works with his hands, probably watches football and drinks beer from cans. Not exactly competition for someone like Derek. I took a long sip of my beer, which was, in fact, from a can, and listened. Besides, Brandon continued, the woman's ready to upgrade. She's just waiting for the right moment to dump the husband and move on to something better. How does Derek know all this? She tells him everything. Apparently, she rates her husband like a 5 out of 10, says he's an interim solution until she finds something permanent. The table erupted in laughter. I finished my beer and left, but not before I'd heard enough to understand exactly how Cara and Derek saw me. As a joke, a placeholder, someone so beneath their notice that they could mock me in public without consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning brought the first real cold snap of the season, the kind that made old houses creak and reminded you that winter in Maine wasn't a suggestion. Cara was in the shower when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Without thinking, I glanced at it. Derek, can't wait to see you tonight. That thing you did yesterday was incredible. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, feeling that cold, hard thing in my chest grow a little bigger. When Cara came out of the bathroom, wrapped in the robe I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago, I was already dressed and ready for work. You're up early, she said. Big day. The Henderson job is behind schedule. She nodded absently, already reaching for her phone. I watched her read Derek's message, watched her smile the way she used to smile at my texts. I'll probably be late again tonight, she said, typing a response. This client is really demanding. They always are, I said. The demanding ones usually want the most attention. Something in my tone made her look up. Is everything okay, Jack? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know, more focused, I guess. Like you're planning something. If she only knew. Just thinking about the future, I said. About what comes next. Well, don't overthink it. Sometimes the best things happen when you're not expecting them. I kissed her goodbye, tasting lies and betrayal on her lips, and headed out to meet Luke. I found him at the Morrison job site, a 19th century farmhouse that had been in his family for 3 generations. We were updating the electrical and plumbing while trying to preserve as much of the original character as possible. It was the kind of work I loved, taking something old and broken and making it whole again. Learn anything about Derek? I asked, pulling on my work gloves. Oh, did I ever? Luke grinned and pulled out his phone. My brother-in-law knows a guy who works at Harbor View. Apparently Derek's been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his married girlfriend. Says she's going to leave her husband as soon as she figures out how to get the most money out of the divorce. Money? Think about it, Jack. You've been renovating that house for 3 years. It's got to be worth twice what you paid for it now. Plus, your business has been doing really well lately. You're not rich, but you're not poor either. The pieces started falling into place. Cara wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to take me for everything I was worth. The timing made sense now. Wait until the house renovation was complete and the business was stable, then file for divorce and claim half of everything. There's more, Luke said. Derek's been telling people that the husband is some kind of loser who doesn't even suspect anything. Says the guy's so pathetic that his wife rates him like a restaurant, 5 stars being the best. 5 out of 10, actually. Jesus, that's even worse. We worked in silence for a while, running new wiring through walls that had stood for more than a century. There was something therapeutic about the physical work, the problem-solving, the gradual transformation of something broken into something functional. Around lunch, Luke's phone rang. He talked for a few minutes, then hung up with a strange expression. That was my cousin Lenny from Murphy's Bar. He says Derek Lane was in there last night with some woman. Not Cara, someone else. Blonde, younger, lots of makeup. Derek's cheating on my wife? Looks like it. Lenny says they were all over each other. Derek was buying drinks for the whole bar, acting like he'd won the lottery. I sat back on my heels, trying to process this information. Derek was sleeping with Cara, who was planning to divorce me and take half my assets, while also sleeping with someone else, and Cara apparently had no idea. You know what this means? Luke said. That Derek's an even bigger piece of shit than I thought? Well, yeah, but also that you've got leverage now. Cara thinks she's trading up from you to Derek, but Derek's already looking for his next upgrade. That afternoon, I decided to do a little more reconnaissance. I drove to Cara's office building and waited in the parking garage. At 5:30, she emerged with Derek, just like before. But this time, I was ready. I'd borrowed a high-quality camera from a photographer friend who owed me a favor. As Cara and Derek walked to his BMW, I took pictures. Derek opening her car door, Derek's hand on her waist, Derek kissing her in full view of anyone who might be watching. They drove to a different hotel this time, the Millbrook Marriott, which was less discreet but more convenient. I followed at a distance and took more pictures in the hotel parking lot, Cara laughing at something Derek said, Derek carrying what was obviously an overnight bag. The two of them walking into the hotel like they owned the place. I was about to leave when I saw something interesting. Derek's BMW was parked in a spot marked Compact Cars Only, and it was clearly over the line, taking up part of the adjacent space. The kind of entitled parking job that said everything you needed to know about someone's character. I walked over and took pictures of the parking job, then noticed something else. Derek had left his gym bag visible in the back seat, along with what looked like a work laptop and some papers scattered on the floor. The car was unlocked. I looked around the parking lot. No security cameras pointed this way, and no one else was around. I opened the passenger door and looked at the papers on the floor. They were printouts of emails between Derek and someone named Jessica, the blonde from Murphy's Bar, apparently. The emails were explicit, detailed, and made it very clear that Derek considered both Cara and Jessica to be temporary diversions while he looked for something better. In one email, Derek wrote, "The married one is useful for now. She's got money and connections, and she's desperate for attention, but she's getting clingy, talking about leaving her husband. I might need to cool things off soon." In another, "The husband is exactly what you'd expect. Works with his hands, drives an old truck, probably peaked in high school. Cara says he's completely clueless. Sometimes I think about telling him just to see what would happen, but why ruin a good thing?" I took pictures of the emails with my phone, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. As I walked back to my truck, I was already planning my next move. Derek thought I was clueless. Cara thought I was an interim solution. They both thought I was too stupid and too passive to fight back. They were about to learn the difference between being underestimated and being harmless. By Friday morning, I had enough evidence to end my marriage and Derek's career, but I wasn't ready to play those cards yet. Instead, I decided it was time for a more direct approach. Cara left for work wearing another new outfit, a red dress that hugged her in all the right places and probably cost more than I made in a week. She'd been spending a lot lately on clothes, makeup, and salon appointments. All for Derek's benefit, though she claimed it was for work. "Big presentation today?" I asked, watching her apply lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Huge," she said without looking at me. "Could determine the whole direction of my career." "Our careers are important," I agreed. "They define us, don't you think? Show people what we're really worth." She finally looked at me, something sharp and calculating in her green eyes. "Some careers are more important than others, Jack. Some of us are building something that matters. And some of us are just interim solutions until something better comes along." The words hung in the air between us. Cara's hand froze halfway to her purse, and for a moment I thought she might actually be honest with me. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud about the temporary nature of things." She stared at me for another few seconds, then grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." "Wouldn't dream of it." After she left, I called Derek's office. I'd looked up the company directory online and knew he was a marketing director at Pinnacle Tech Solutions, the same startup where Cara worked as a project manager. "Derek Lane's office," a cheerful receptionist answered. "Hi, this is Jack Dalton from Heritage Home Restoration. I'm working on a project that Mr. Lane might be interested in. Could I schedule a meeting with him today?" "Let me check his calendar. He has an opening at 2 o'clock. Would that work?" "Perfect." At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into the sleek, modern offices of Pinnacle Tech Solutions. Everything was glass and chrome and expensive-looking furniture that probably wasn't as comfortable as it appeared. I told the receptionist I was there to see Derek, then waited in the lobby, watching Cara's co-workers hurry past with their tablets and their important expressions. Derek appeared after a few minutes, looking confused. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck payment, and his hair was styled with the kind of precision that required professional help. "Mr. Dalton? I'm Derek Lane. I have to admit, I'm not sure what kind of project you wanted to discuss." I stood up and shook his hand, squeezing just a little harder than necessary. "Actually, Derek, I think we've met before. I'm Cara Dalton's husband." His face went through several interesting expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally something that might have been fear. Oh, he said. Oh, right. From the Christmas party. That's right. You complimented my wife's dress, if I remember correctly. Said she had excellent taste. Did I? I meet a lot of people at those things. I'm sure you do. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? I have a business proposition that I think you'll find very interesting. Derek glanced around the lobby, probably wondering if anyone was watching us. Sure, my office is upstairs. I followed him to an elevator and then down a hallway lined with motivational posters and corporate awards. Derek's office was corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Millbrook. It was the kind of office that was designed to impress, all clean lines and expensive accessories. Nice view, I said, walking to the windows. You can see the Riverside Inn from here, and the Marriott. Great hotels, both of them. Derek sat down behind his desk, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. So, Mr. Dalton, what kind of business proposition did you want to discuss? I turned away from the windows and smiled at him. Actually, Derek, I wanted to talk to you about ratings, performance reviews, the way we evaluate people's worth. I'm not sure I follow. Well, for instance, how would you rate my wife? As a person, I mean. What's she worth to you? Derek's face had gone pale. Mr. Dalton, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all. See, Derek, I know about the hotels, I know about the emails, I know about Jessica, the blonde from Murphy's Bar who you've been seeing on the side. Derek started to stand up, but I held up a hand. Sit down, Derek. We're not done talking. Look, if this is about Cara, this is about respect, I interrupted. This is about the fact that you think I'm some kind of idiot who works with his hands and doesn't know what's going on in his own house. This is about you and my wife rating me like I'm a restaurant on Yelp. Derek sat back down heavily. How much do you want? Excuse me. Money. How much money do you want to keep quiet about this? I stared at him. You think I'm here to blackmail you? Aren't you? Derek, I don't want your money. I want you to understand something. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, and that the people you think are beneath your notice might be paying more attention than you realize. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd taken, Derek and Cara kissing in the hotel parking lot. This is a nice picture, don't you think? Very clear, good lighting. I've got about 20 more just like it. Derek's hands were shaking now. What do you want from me? I want you to break up with my wife. What? You heard me. I want you to end whatever this is between you and Cara, tonight. And I want you to do it in a way that makes it clear you were never serious about her. Why would you want that? If you know about us, why don't you just divorce her? I walked around his desk and leaned down so we were face to face. Because, Derek, I want Cara to understand what it feels like to be rated and found wanting. I want her to know what it's like to be someone's interim solution. And I want you to be the one to teach her. Derek swallowed hard. And if I don't? Then these pictures go to your boss, to Cara's boss, to Jessica, and to everyone else who might find them interesting. Plus, I might have to tell people about how you've been bragging around town about sleeping with other men's wives. Small towns talk, Derek, and they remember. I straightened up and headed for the door. You've got until tonight to decide. But Derek, choose carefully, because this is the only deal you're going to get from me. I left him sitting in his expensive office, staring out at the hotels where he'd thought he was so clever, so untouchable. As I waited for the elevator, I could see Cara through the glass walls of the conference room, leading a meeting, completely unaware that her world was about to change. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, already planning the next phase. Derek would break up with Cara tonight. I was sure of that. He was too scared and too selfish to do anything else. But that was just the beginning. Cara still thought I was a 5 out of 10 husband who didn't deserve better than being an interim solution. It was time to show her what a 10 looked like when he was done being underestimated. Derek broke up with Cara that night, just like I knew he would. I didn't have to follow them or spy on them to know it had happened. Cara's face when she came home at 9:30 told me everything I needed to know. She looked like someone had slapped her. Her makeup was smeared, her perfect hair was disheveled, and she was carrying her shoes instead of wearing them. She walked through the front door like she was in a daze, not even noticing that I was sitting in the living room reading a book. "How was your meeting?" I asked without looking up. She jumped, startled. "Jack, I didn't see you there. Long day at the office?" "Yes," she said, but her voice cracked on the word. "Very long." She started to head upstairs, but I stopped her. "Cara, can we talk for a minute?" She turned around slowly, and I could see she'd been crying. "I'm really tired, Jack. Can it wait until tomorrow?" "I don't think it can." She came into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch, as far from me as possible. She looked fragile, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd been raiding me and planning my replacement. "Derek ended things with you tonight, didn't he?" I said. The color drained from her face. "What?" "Derek Lane, your co-worker. Your client meetings at the Riverside Inn and the Marriott. He broke up with you tonight." Cara stared at me for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find words. Finally, she managed, "How did you know?" "I've known for weeks, Cara. I know about the hotels, the lies, the late-night phone calls. I know about you raiding me like a restaurant and calling me an interim solution until you could find something better." She started crying then, not the pretty tears of a woman who knew how to cry attractively, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was falling apart. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out like this. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. You made choices, Cara. You decided I wasn't good enough, that I was just a placeholder until Derek came along. How does it feel to find out you were his placeholder too?" She looked up at me, confusion mixing with the pain in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of Derek's emails. "Derek's been seeing someone else the whole time he was seeing you, a woman named Jessica. He never had any intention of leaving with you or building a life with you. You were just convenient." Cara read the emails, her face getting paler with each line. When she finished, she looked up at me with something like horror. "You knew about Jessica and you didn't tell me?"
"Why would I? You made it clear that I was just an interim solution, that you were looking for an upgrade. I figured you could handle your own relationship problems with Derek." "But Jack, I love you. This thing with Derek, it was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I closed my phone and looked at her. "It meant something to me, Cara. It meant that the woman I married, the woman I spent 3 years renovating this house for, the woman I built a business to support, thought I was worth exactly 5 out of 10 points.
"You heard that phone call. I heard a lot of things. I heard you planning to divorce me as soon as the house was finished and the business was stable. I heard you and Derek laughing about how clueless I was, how pathetic I was, how I probably peaked in high school." Cara was crying harder now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no desire to comfort her, no urge to forgive and forget. "Jack, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can start over. I'll do anything." "Anything?" "Yes, anything." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd lived for 3 years, where we'd planned to build a life together. "Here's what's going to happen, Cara. You're going to pack a bag and you're going to leave. Tonight. You can stay with Melanie or find a hotel or sleep in your car. I don't care. But you're not staying here. Jack, you can't just throw me out. This is my house too." "Actually, it's not. I bought this house before we got married, and I've paid for all the renovations myself. Legally, you have no claim to it." "But we're married. I have rights." "You had a marriage. You threw it away for a man who thought you were as disposable as you thought I was." She stood up, anger finally replacing the tears. "So that's it? You're just going to end 8 years of marriage because I made one mistake?" "One mistake? Cara, you've been planning to leave me for months. You've been stealing money from our joint account to buy clothes and pay for hotel rooms. You've been lying to me every single day. This wasn't one mistake. This was a campaign." "Fine," she said, her voice turning cold. "Fine. But don't think you're going to get away with this. I'll fight you in court. I'll take half of everything you have." I turned back to her and smiled. "Good luck with that. See, Cara, while you were busy planning your exit strategy, I was planning mine. I've got photos, emails, bank records, hotel receipts. I've got witnesses who heard Derek bragging about sleeping with a married woman. I've got evidence of adultery, financial infidelity, and fraud." "Fraud?" "You used our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms where you were cheating on me. That's fraud, Cara. And in Maine, adultery affects divorce settlements." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Who are you? This isn't the Jack I married." "You're right. The Jack you married was a 5 out of 10 husband who was grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw his way. The Jack you married was an interim solution who didn't know his own worth." I walked over to the front door and held it open. "This Jack knows exactly what he's worth. And it's a hell of a lot more than you ever gave me credit for." Cara looked around the living room one more time, at the restored hardwood floors and the original crown molding and all the work I'd put into making this house a home for us. "I really did love you, Jack, in the beginning." "I know," I said. "But love isn't a rating system, Cara, and marriage isn't an interim solution until something better comes along." She walked past me and out the door, and I watched her get into her car and drive away. Then I closed the door, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the old house settle around me. For the first time in months, I was alone in my own home. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. I wasn't anyone's interim solution anymore.